Let us today see the keyword final when it applies to data types and when it applies to objects. Now I have created a simple class fin and a final variable in text and I assign a value 10. Now whenever we designate a variable as final, this means that the value of the variable cannot be changed now. In case I try to change the value here, I say and now I try to change the value of this x to say 30. So it gives me an error here which says that the field cannot be assigned. So once you assign a value to a final variable, you cannot reassign any other value to this variable. The second option in this case is if we do not give a value to a final variable, then we address to this as a blank final because we haven't given any value to this. So such a variable is of no use because we cannot assign any value to it later on. Just comment this. Now it says the blank final field may not have been initialized. So for any variable which is declared final has to be initialized. Now in case we haven't initialized this at the time of declaration, we have two options. One is we can initialize this within the initialization block. So this is one option where we can initialize this and we can print the value. So we are getting the value 10. Now the second option is that I declare a constructor of the class and I can initialize this value within the constructor. So up to the constructor we have an option that we can initialize this value of the variable which is declared final. So now I can again just check out what value we are getting. So now the value is coming out to be 20. However, if I don't initialize this value and try to give this value within the main, this is not allowed. So we have an option to initialize this variable up to the constructor. So in case we have initialized the variable up to the constructor, then everything is compiling fine and we get an output as per the value that we have assigned within the constructor. Now this value can be assigned only once. Suppose I say, now as I have already given a value within the initialization block, I cannot provide another value within the constructor. So it gives you an option only once to initialize a blank final variable. In case we have done within the initialization block, then we cannot do the same within the constructor. So either we can do it within the initialization block or we can do within the constructor. However, it is absolutely necessary that you initialize this variable till the constructor in case you want the program to compile and run. So I'll just comment this. So we can just summarize this, that final when you apply to any variable means that you cannot change its value once initialized. Now that once you have an option in case you don't initialize within the declaration, then you can initialize within the initialization block or you can initialize within the constructor. However, if you do not initialize up to the constructor or you cannot initialize after the constructor, so both these options you can utilize to initialize the object if we did not initialize it within the declaration. Now let us see what happens when we apply this final to objects. So I'll take an instance variable, give it an initial value, remove this, create a method show, pass it a final variable f, Now final, when we apply it to a reference, means that we are finalizing the relationship between the reference and the object. Now this means that when we have finalized this reference f, means whatever object we shall pass to this reference f, we cannot change this reference from that object. However, what we can do is we can make any changes in the object. See the effect. But what we cannot do is we cannot shift this from the object that we have already assigned. So timing, I'll just comment this and set up things here. I'll make this method static so that we do not need any object of class fin. So I'll call this method show with this object f, or I can name it ff to avoid any confusion with f. And after this I can print the value of x. I can change the value of x here. I can pass this reference to this. Now ff has no problem, it is not at all final and no restriction applies to ff. However, the restriction applies to this reference variable, which is f. So whatever object we are passing to f, which is the object which is referenced by ff, so it can make any changes to this object ff, but it cannot be withdrawn from this object. So currently we haven't withdrawn this from the object and we are only making changes to the object which is referred by f. So we have 30. So we have changed here 30. Oh, I'll just put a change here as 40. So we have changed x to 30 here, and then we have called the method where this f has made changes to the same object to 40, and then we are again getting 40 and everything is working fine. But as soon as we try to shift this object reference to another object, the problem starts and it says that this is a final variable, so it cannot be now changed or reallocated to another object. So this is what is meant by a final object reference. The final object reference means whatever object we have assigned to this reference, we cannot shift it to some other object. I'll just, if possible, show it through a small picture. So if you can see now, I'll just put line numbers to demo. This is line number 1, this is line number 2, that's line number 3. Then we go to this method. This is line number 4, line number 5, line number 6. So in line number 1, what has happened is we have created a new object. We have referred this object to a reference called ff. Now initially the value of x here is 10. Then we have changed this value of 10 to 30. And then we have called ff show with this ff. Then we have another final reference which is attached to this object f. So now final means that now this path is final. We can never change this path throughout the life cycle of this reference f. So now f makes a change to this 30 and assigns it value 40, which is it is permitted to do. It can make any changes to this object this reference f can make any changes to this object, but the only thing we can't do is if we try to assign it to a different object and cut down this path, this pointing we cannot remove and assign it to some other object, which is where the problem really starts. So this is what is not compiling. So final when applied to reference means whatever object you have assigned once to this reference, you cannot detach it from the reference. So this is final relation between a reference and an object. The reference can make any changes to the object which has been assigned to it, but you cannot withdraw this reference from this object and assign it another object. So this is final when applied to variables and final when applied to object references.